Hi, I'm Rosita with Root Design Company, and today we're going to talk about how we plan our cut flower garden in a summer. We made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, and I'm hoping that maybe by us sharing our tips with you today, you can avoid some of those mistakes. I know one time we started flowers inside too early. I don't remember what flower it was, and they ended up dying before we could get them out in the garden. We started them too late already, and they just struggled to take off in the garden. And one time we planted them too early in the garden. A late frost came through and wiped out most of the garden. So those are things I think that you can avoid if you know when to plant your flowers and stick to it. We start a lot of our flowers inside under grow lights to give us a jump start on the growing season. It's nothing fancy. We just have a couple of lights in the back of the basement, and we start probably 75% of our flowers back there. It's important not to start them too soon since they can get root bound or get really leggy. So we figured out that if we can reverse engineer it, we have a lot better success. The first step I have is to sketch out a scale drawing of our garden. I like to use Excel, the spreadsheet, and just manipulate the columns and the rows so you have a square. You can also use graph paper. That's what I started out using in the beginning. Once I have my map drawn, then I label all the beds with the type of flower I want to put in it. And then that gives me an idea of where everything goes, and then I can also sort of calculate about how many plants I need per bed. The next thing we do is go through and make a list of the flowers we want to grow. We'll start with the list we grew last year and see what we liked, and if we didn't like it, we give it the axe, like we say. We also try to stick with a couple of color palettes because that sort of simplifies the whole planning process, and you end up with cohesive bouquets later on. We have about 3 color palettes that we usually like to stick to, and one of them is burgundy and blush, and then we also do peach and pink tones, and then we have white and green as well. We add in some red, and there's also like lavender and purple flowers in there too, but we try to stick to the 3 main ones to plan our flower list. We also like to plan for a variety of shapes in the flowers that we choose. One would be focal flowers, zinnias, if I can say that right, and dahlias are our 2 main ones for that. We also like to plan for some spire flowers. Those have a little bit longer of a shape, add a little bit of interest to your bouquets. Larkspur is one, foxglove, and delphinium. Those are all really nice spire flowers. We also like to grow little twinkle flowers, interesting little bits like bachelor buttons, agrostemma, gomphrena. I think we're trying some baby's breath again this year, believe it or not. And then I usually have a spreadsheet, something like this, where I like to fill in how many packets I need, the seed count in a packet, and the varieties, where I'm buying it from, and then the cost. Just so I have in one place kind of an idea of the plan for the year. The next thing I like to look at is figuring out my safe to plant date. And that is just basically an educated guess, I guess, on when it's safe to plant everything out in the garden. There's 2 things to take into consideration. One would be when your average last frost date is. For us, it's usually around the end of April, 1st of May, although last year was a bit of an anomaly, and it was, I think, the end of March, 1st of April. So every year is a little different, but you should probably stick with the average just to be safe. And then the other thing to take in consideration is if there's a full moon around that time. For us, it's the May full moon. And part of the reason for that is because when there is a full moon, there's often a little bit of a cold spell. And so you can expect either a dip in temperatures or even a frost. And I know we've had frost here as late as the end of May. So every year is different, but if you can kind of shoot for an average, you have a good idea of when all your plants can be planted out. And that's important because that's where we backtrack and decide when to start everything. This year, the full moon lands on May the 7th, I think. I'm planning for a safe to start date of May 4, but I'm gonna really carefully watch the weather because I don't wanna plant stuff out and have it toasted by a frost. The next thing I look at is figuring out a schedule for when to sow all the seeds. Now, you have to look at all the different seeds that you're starting and figure out how many weeks before the last frost date that it's safe to start them indoors. I use a lot of different things to figure this out. I'll look at the seed packet. Another place to look for growing information is on is Johnny's seeds and florets. That's probably no surprise, we talk about those a lot. But they have a lot of good information on when to start the seed, also germination temperatures, which is important to know too. I also have a couple of books that I like to use. One is this one, Seed Sowing and Saving. And this is good if they have a lot of information in here on flowers, but also on vegetables. So if you have a vegetable garden or something that you also grow, it's got a lot of good information on that. Another one I like to use is the Gardener's A to Z Guide to Growing. And this is a really good resource if you want to know a lot of sort of the general growing information for everything. They'll give you like when to start seeds indoors, and then also like plant care. So I've used this book a lot. I also keep a chart of all the information that I've kind of compiled over the years. Saves me from looking all the time. So I take the information in this book and I'll put it in my chart that I keep, and I update it every year. This might be nerdy and geeky and stuff, but I love it. You can see kind of, I have flower varieties, and then also germination times, how many weeks to succession sow stuff. So lots of information there that I like to keep at my fingertips when I'm starting. One reason it's important for me to keep something like this is because I can look at all the information online and listen to what other people are saying, but my zone might not be like theirs. And so if like, for example, I think it was celosia that I had found I should start 6 to 8 weeks before I planted out. Well, I did that, and the stuff was root bound and leggy and terrible. And we only need about 4 or 5 weeks at max to get it started inside before it gets planted out. Once I know how many weeks I need to start things ahead of time, then I'll make a note of that beside every flower variety, and I'll take my safe to plant date and count back the weeks and give it a date. Then I put that all in a spreadsheet. So basically I've got the variety, and then the date I want to start it inside, and then the number of plants I want to start, and then the actual sow date, which is when I actually do sow it. Because sometimes I plan something and something comes out and we don't sow it until a week later. And then I also have a transplant date for when it goes out in the garden too. And then one more important thing that I like to do is to keep a running to-do list of all the stuff, garden related jobs that we have to do in a season. And I like to split it up by month because it can be really overwhelming to see all the stuff you have to do. And if you split it by months, you also kind of keep on track. You're not going to skip something important like prune the roses in April and it's June and you haven't pruned them. You also will remember, when to stake your dahlias if you've got it on your list. So I like to have a list like that also keeps track of other garden jobs, because when you're busy starting seeds inside and getting stuff growing, keeping it alive under lights, it's easy to just kind of forget all the other stuff that needs to be done unless it's written down on a list somewhere. So that's a lot of information, and I feel like I rambled on for a while there, but hopefully you'll find some tips that can help you with your own gardens this year. If you have any questions, just drop us a line in the comments below. We'll try to get those answered. We're not experts by any means. This is just stuff that we found works for us, for our zone. We're in zone 6A. Sometimes we have a 5B winter, I say, but typically we can plan for zone 6A. So this is kind of what works for us in our zone. We'll also have a blog post with all this information and links to these papers here, the spreadsheets that I talked about. So if you want those, you can check that out. Thanks for watching today.